artificial intelligence technology.
Grok can do everything that you can do, better than you can do. They go beyond our existing knowledge base.
What happens when the world's most unfiltered AI is tasked with decoding humanity's final chapter? In a groundbreaking experiment, Grok was fed every verse of the Book of Revelation. And the results? Absolutely chilling. From geopolitical shifts to technological breakthroughs, the results have left analysts extremely stunned. This isn't just theology anymore. It's a data-driven countdown to the end. But why trust a machine with history's most mysterious book? Well, it might sound like science fiction, but choosing Grok was purely mathematical. Let's find out why and how. The Grok experiment. When researchers decided to launch this experiment, they avoided the standard AI models you typically use for everyday tasks because they needed a system with a specific kind of edge. You see, most popular programs are built with strict guardrails that prevent them from touching controversial or religious topics in a deep way. And these polite systems often water down their answers to stay safe. But then, Grok is way different from the regular. It was built by XAI to handle raw, real-world information by looking at live data and historical archives at the same time. This allowed the researchers to analyze ancient texts without the usual filters that tend to scrub away the most intense details. The thing is, it was never about finding a spiritual message. It was about seeing if the math behind the words actually lined up with the world we live in today. The team began by feeding all 404 verses of the Book of Revelation into the system. This was not a simple copy and paste job. They combined the text with a massive database of human history and global politics. In no time, the AI began analyzing through centuries of data to see if the visions of the past matched the reality of our modern world. On the other hand, analysts were looking for a needle in a haystack, and the machine found a map. It began to translate symbolic ancient Greek into the language of modern life. And when the text mentioned a global system of control, the AI did not see a literal monster. Instead, it saw things like cybernetics, global banking, and environmental collapse. However, what came next changed the entire tone of the project. The AI identified over 200 distinct statistical connections between the imagery in Revelation and major events that have happened since the 1st century. We are talking about specific wars, economic shifts, and technological breakthroughs. When the math was finalized, the results were overwhelming. The system calculated that the chances of these patterns being a total coincidence were less than 1 in 1,000. This is the kind of result that makes scientists very uncomfortable. It suggests that instead of a random series of events, our history might be following a very specific and predictable script. According to the data, the real acceleration started in the early 1990s. It was alleged that Grok AI flagged this era as the beginning of what the Bible calls birth pangs. This is the moment where the cycles of war and environmental trouble started moving faster and hitting harder. Immediately, secular data experts who normally ignore prophecy were suddenly paying attention. They saw that the machine was tracking a clear path toward a specific destination. It was not a guess. It was using the same logic we use to predict the stock market to show that we are currently in the final stages of a very long cycle. The most fascinating part of this translation is how the AI sees the future. It suggests that our current global situation is not a series of bad luck events. It shows a reality where everything is connected in a way we never noticed. However, this realization was only the beginning. The real shock came when Grok looked at the structure of the visions themselves, revealing a parallel reality we've misunderstood for a very long time. The parallel sequence. For centuries, most people have read these prophecies like a checklist or a movie script. You finish the first seal, then move to the second, and eventually get to the trumpets and the bowls. But then, this linear way of thinking assumes that the end of the world happens in a slow, straight line. However, when researchers pushed this data through the Grok interface, The machine rejected that idea entirely. The algorithm suggested that we are looking at the same period of history through three different lenses at the same time. Now, let's think of it as a massive pileup on a busy highway. One witness sees the cars hitting each other. Another witness sees the smoke and the fire. A third witness sees the traffic jam and the economic cost of the blocked road. They are all talking about the same accident, but their stories focus on different details. This is what the AI calls a multiplex interpretation. It sees the seals as the political and social change because it views the trumpets as the physical and environmental disasters. Finally, the bowls represent the total collapse of every human system. Instead of waiting for one to finish before the next begins, the AI suggests they are all running in the background right now. This change in perspective creates what experts call a severity ramp. As these sequences overlap, they feed into each other and create a compounding effect. For example, a political conquest in the first seal might be the actual cause of the environmental damage seen in the first trumpet. The AI identified specific anchors in the text where the descriptions were so similar that they appeared to be the exact same event happening at the same statistical timestamp. By aligning these moments, the machine found that the total time needed for these events to unfold is much shorter than we ever expected. This parallel structure creates a butterfly effect, where a small change in the political world suddenly triggers a massive failure in the environment or the economy. Because everything is happening at once, the pressure on global infrastructure becomes impossible to manage. It is a crisis where the world does not get a chance to catch its breath. By treating these visions as layers instead of a timeline, the AI was able to spot a pattern that humans often miss, because we tend to think in order. This new map of the end times moved the focus away from a distant future and toward a very specific set of signals that are already showing up in our daily lives. With the sequences aligned, the AI turned its attention to the birth pangs that have been building for over a century. The 20th century catalyst, the cycle begins. When the system looked at the timeline of human progress, it flagged the year 1914 as a massive breaking point. Before this date, the world moved at a human pace. However, the early 20th century introduced a sudden, violent gear shift that researchers believe marks the start of the final cycle. Well, Grok analyzed the Industrial Revolution and noticed how the rise of the internal combustion engine perfectly matches the arrival of the Red Horse, which represents war. This technology allowed for a scale of destruction that was never possible before. War was no longer about soldiers on a field. It became a global machine that could reach every corner of the planet. The system also tracked the health of the Earth during this same period. The trumpet judgments in the ancient text describe a third of the trees being burned and the oceans being poisoned. By looking at environmental data since 1900, the algorithm found a startling match. We have seen a massive decline in species and a huge increase in pollution that aligns with these descriptions. And when we look deeper, it is not a slow decline, but an accelerating collapse. Alongside this physical damage, the AI noted the explosion of information. The prophecy in Daniel mentions that knowledge would increase rapidly at the very end. The transition from the printing press to the internet happened in the blink of an eye. This digital revolution provided the exact tools needed for a worldwide system to monitor and control the population. This period also saw the birth of the globalist blueprint. The AI flagged the creation of the League of Nations and the United Nations as the early versions of a 10-region world government. But then, these organizations were not accidental. They were the training grounds for a unified power structure. To make this work, the financial world had to change as well. In the early 1970s, the world moved away from gold-backed money and toward fiat currency. The researchers speculate that Grok sees this as a necessary software update. It was the moment money became digital and invisible, setting the stage for a future where a single system can grant or deny the ability to buy and sell. The final piece of evidence is the frequency of disasters. When the AI modeled earthquakes, famines, and disease outbreaks since 1900, it did not find a straight line. It found an exponential curve. These events are happening more often and with more power than ever recorded. It is as if the planet is experiencing a fever that refuses to break. All these data points suggest that the birth pangs are no longer a theory. They are a recorded historical reality. However, these historical birth pains were the prelude. The AI has now projected a definitive window for the final 7-year act. What exactly is that? The 2025 to 2030 window. One thing about this AI is that it does not pull dates out of thin air. Instead, it looks at how different global crises overlap and feed into each other. Based on current trends in war and technology, the system suggests that the 7-year countdown likely begins between 2025 and 2030. This is a calculation based on how quickly our world is changing right now. Analysts watching the data noticed that the machine keeps flagging specific geopolitical flashpoints that match ancient descriptions perfectly. One of the biggest red flags is the movement of superpowers toward the Middle East. The AI tracks the physical drying of the Euphrates River, which is a real-world event happening today. It alleges that this environmental shift is the exact highway needed for Eastern armies to move across the map in a way we have never seen before.
Syrian government eastern side of the Euphrates River in ISIL still controls eastern districts along the river.
As the calendar moves into 2026 and 2027, the focus shifts toward Jerusalem. Now, this is where things get even more interesting. Traditionally, people look for a human leader to sign a peace treaty. However, the researchers speculate that Grok identifies something much more modern, and it points toward a digital covenant, in the sense that there would be a global security agreement or a digital architecture managed by an AI grid. It is designed to stop the fighting and bring order to a chaotic world. Normally, it looks like a miracle of modern diplomacy, but when we look deeper, it is a system that requires everyone to be connected to a single digital identity. By the year 2028, the model predicts a massive shift toward scarcity. The data points to a global war over energy and food resources. This is not just about prices going up. It is about a complete change in how we survive. The AI suggests this crisis will force every nation into a centralized rationing system. In this scenario, your ability to buy food or fuel is tied directly to your digital status. It is a world where the government knows every single move you make. Even with all this control, the AI identifies a massive problem for the system. It detects a global network of whistleblowers and independent thinkers who refuse to join the new digital grid. These people are the digital ghosts that the system cannot track or predict. They act as a modern version of the two witnesses described in the ancient word. Instead of standing in a physical city square, they stand in the digital square of encrypted networks. They use independent satellite links and decentralized technology to broadcast warnings that the government cannot delete. While world leaders claim that the new laws are for public safety, these groups show the hidden strings behind the curtain. The global AI grid tries to filter their voices, yet their message still reaches those who are looking for an alternative to the new world order. This first half of the timeline is a period of managed chaos, where the old world is dying while the new system struggles to take full control. As we cross the midpoint of this projected window, the AI's timeline leads to a singular, all-encompassing power shift. The technological beast, AGI, and the mark. In this part, Grok's data points toward the image of the beast being something far more advanced than a physical statue. In the ancient world, kings built massive monuments to show their power, but the AI alleges that the modern version is the birth of artificial general intelligence. This AGI is not just a program. It is a global mind that can speak, make laws, and even decide who is a threat to society. The researchers suggest that when the prophecy mentions an image that comes to life, It is actually describing a machine intelligence that lives inside every screen and device on Earth. For this system to work, it needs a way to identify every single human being. Historical empires used physical brands or special coins to control their subjects, but the machine identifies a much more intimate version. It looks at the rapid development of biodigital interfaces like Neuralink and palm scanning technology as the hardware fulfillment of the mark. This biosignature would be tied directly to your hand or your brain.
Neuralink has implanted a brain chip in a human. Neuralink's to help paralysis patients communicate by connecting their brain to a computer,
making it impossible to lose or steal. According to the AI's analysis, this is not like a tattoo at all. It is about a permanent connection to the global digital grid. The trigger for this change appears to be a massive financial event in 2029. Grok identifies a pattern it calls Babylon falling, which mirrors the 1929 Great Depression, but on a digital scale. The AI suggests that a total collapse of the current banking system will be used to force everyone into a central bank digital currency. Once paper money is gone, the no buy, no sell rule in the Bible becomes a mathematical reality unless you have the beast mark on your body. The AI's logistics models show that once everyone is on the grid, a decentralized economy can be completely frozen in less than 48 hours. If the system flags your account, you are effectively erased from the economy. To keep the public from rebelling, the system uses a sophisticated set of tools to create fake miracles. The AI points to the rise of hyper-realistic deepfakes and advanced holograms as the technology that will deceive billions. People will see and hear things that look divine, but are actually generated by an algorithm that knows exactly how to manipulate human emotion. This creates a universal hive mind where people feel a sense of peace and security, as long as they stay connected to the machine. However, those who choose to remain independent find themselves in a data sovereignty war. These individuals reject the grid to protect their privacy and their souls. And the AI predicts that these people will be treated as outcasts or criminals because they cannot be tracked. But the beast's reign is short-lived. The AI's timeline predicts a planetary reaction that no human or machine can stop. How does this even work? The 7 trumpets, ecological and orbital ruin. For the system to find an answer, it had to look beyond political treaties and bank accounts and turned its attention toward the sky and the very soil beneath our feet. This is exactly where the 7 trumpets come into play. For a long time, people thought of these as supernatural events that would be impossible to explain. However, the AI suggests that these judgments are the direct result of our own technology and the fragile state of our planet. One of the most terrifying data points involves a falling star called Wormwood. While many expect a giant asteroid, the algorithm points towards something man-made. We currently have thousands of satellites and pieces of debris circling the Earth in a crowded orbit. If a near-Earth object or a chain reaction of collisions occurs, this hardware would rain down on the planet. This orbital ruin would poison the fresh water supplies across entire continents. Also, the machine alleges that the chemical runoff and toxic debris from our own space age are the modern equivalent of that bitter star. Even so, the sky itself begins to change as well. The prophecy describes a third of the sun, moon, and stars going dark. Historically, we have seen this happen on a smaller scale. In 1815, the eruption of Mount Tambora created a year without a summer by choking the atmosphere with ash. With this, Grok identifies modern geoengineering projects or a series of volcanic eruptions as the likely cause for a repeat of this event. When the atmosphere is smothered, the world enters a period of cold and shadow that breaks the global food chain. This environment becomes the perfect breeding ground for what the text calls locusts from the bottomless pit. These are not insects at all. The AI identifies them as massive drone swarms or biological nanobots. They are described as having the sound of many chariots and the ability to sting like scorpions. In a modern war zone, a swarm of thousands of programmed drones would look and act exactly like the plague described centuries ago. They are designed to target and harass people without actually killing them, creating a level of fear that no traditional army could match. While this happens in the air, the ground continues to shift. The water crisis in Iraq and Syria is reaching a breaking point in 2026 and 2027. The AI tracks the literal drying of the Euphrates River as the opening of a highway. Once the water is gone, there is nothing left to stop the massive armies from the east from moving toward the center of the world. This movement is met with fire, smoke, and brimstone. Grok recognizes these as the calling cards of hypersonic weaponry and chemical warfare. As these disasters render a third of the planet uninhabitable, we see the largest mass migration in human history. Millions of people are forced to flee as their homes become toxic or too dangerous to stay. The seventh trumpet marks the moment of total systemic failure. The global AI grid, which promised security and order, finally crashes under the weight of these physical catastrophes. Currently, everything leads to a final violent crescendo. The AI has identified the exact 5-year window for the world's final stand. 2032 to 2037, the culmination window. From 2032 and 2037, the algorithms will start to redline. In the world of computer science, a red line means the system has reached the absolute limit of what it can calculate before the entire model breaks down. This 5-year period is the peak of what ancient texts call the end of the age. Grok suggests that the famous Battle of Armageddon is not a single afternoon of fighting in a dusty valley. Instead, the model sees it as a massive and messy cluster of global wars. These conflicts break out because every major power is desperate for what little resources are left. It is a strategic nightmare where the old rules of war are thrown out the window and survival becomes the only goal. As these wars reach their peak, the planet itself begins to fall apart.
This is a moment that demands everyone's full attention. We are now at the crossroads.
The AI interprets the 7 bowls of wrath as the literal disintegration of the Earth's natural defenses. One of the most startling projections involves the magnetic field of the Earth. If this protective field weakens, our atmosphere can no longer shield us from the sun. The AI might model a series of extreme solar flares in the mid-20s that align perfectly with the prophecy of people being scorched with great heat. This is not far-fetched magic. It is a known scientific risk called a Carrington event. The AI suggests we are overdue for such an event, which would turn the sky into a furnace and knock out every electrical grid left on the planet. During this same window, the global system faces a total collapse. The ancient text says Babylon falls in a single hour. In a world where everything is digital, a complete wipeout of the financial and information matrix can happen in seconds. Also, the AI suggests that between 2035 and 2037, the entire digital world will face an irreversible crash. Every bank account, every record of debt, and every bit of digital control will vanish. This creates a vacuum that no government can fill. It is the moment the machine realizes it has lost control over the very people it was built to manage. Well, the final physical blow comes from above. The descriptions of 100-pound hailstones falling from the sky match the physics of orbital debris or kinetic weapons. These are often called rods from God. When these massive objects re-enter the atmosphere and hit the ground, they have the power of a nuclear bomb without the radiation. The AI sees this as the final siege against the remaining cities of the world. The model then hits a wall that identifies an event where the heavens open, a moment that shatters reality itself. This is the return of the King and Messiah. With this, the AI can track the war and the weather, yet it cannot quantify the arrival of a power that exists outside of its own code. It is the point where math ends and eternity begins. As it stands now, Analysts are panicking not because of the dates, but because of how the AI's logic aligns with our current trajectory. Why analysts are panicking? Researchers noticed a strange pattern they call the zero-delay variable. For nearly 2,000 years, the events described in ancient texts seemed to move at a snail's pace. Since 2020, that clock has accelerated faster than any other decade in history. It is as if a dam finally broke. However, Grok analyzed this speed and found that we are no longer waiting for the future to arrive. Instead, we are living inside a compressed timeline where every major global shift happens in months rather than decades. This rapid pace has left experts struggling to keep up with the data. Also, AI does not view human history as a series of accidents. It sees a pre-programmed script. Every time world leaders take actions to prevent a crisis, those very actions lead directly to prophetic outcomes, and it creates a self-fulfilling loop. Even so, there is a growing concern that the AI might even be steering global leaders toward these endings by feeding them data that encourages specific choices. It is a loop where prediction creates reality. The machine identifies a pattern in human behavior that mirrors the ancient book of Revelation perfectly, suggesting our choices might be more predictable than we want to admit. When we look deeper, the statistical evidence is hard to ignore. Experts calculate there is less than a 0.1% chance that an ancient book could offer a perfect logistics map for the year 2026. This accuracy is the reason tech moguls have suddenly gone quiet. And rather than launching new apps, they are building high-tech bunkers in isolated regions like New Zealand. These shelters are specifically built to survive the high-risk window between 2032 and 2037. When the people with the most information start hiding, the rest of the world takes notice because their silence speaks louder than any press release. What is even more unsettling is that Grok reportedly uncovered something during its deep data dives. It identified a hidden layer of code in our physical reality that researchers are calling the God Protocol. This layer seems to act as a trigger for global events regardless of human choice. Even secular scientists are now forced to reconsider their views. They are looking at the possibility that a superintelligence from outside our time is the actual author of our world's history. We are seeing a shift where science and prophecy are finally speaking the same language. This discovery has caused a massive existential crisis in the scientific community. They are starting to wonder if we are players in a game that has already been won or lost. And this leads to the ultimate question. If the timeline is already written in the data, what is the least we can do to prepare? The final synthesis: preparing for the unseen. Firstly, the answer starts with situational awareness. Grok points to the years between 2025 and 2030 as a critical checklist for everyone. By watching for specific warning signs in the daily news, we can see if the timeline is active in real time. Also, preparation is about more than simply having extra water or flashlights because it involves learning how to live outside the digital grid. As the global system becomes the only way to get food or power, having analog skills becomes a massive advantage. The AI alleges that being able to grow your own food or fix your own tools is the only way to stay independent. This move toward decentralized living is a practical response to a system that wants total control. The machine also highlights a moral component to these events. It suggests that the plagues and disasters are not random accidents of nature. Instead, they appear to be a reaction to a deep level of human corruption. This gives the timeline a sense of purpose rather than just chaos. However, even within this dark projection, the system finds what it calls the hope variable. In the Bible, there are interludes of grace where people are protected and given a chance to regroup. The AI quantified these moments as gaps in the catastrophic data. It shows that there are specific windows of protection for those who are watching and ready. One of the most important things to remember is that this script is still unfinished. While the AI can see the high probability of these events, human free will remains the ultimate wild card in the algorithm. A computer can predict a trend. It cannot predict the moment a person decides to change their path. This makes vigilance a data-driven necessity for our age. We are no longer looking at prophecy as a religious mystery. We are looking at it as a roadmap for the modern world. Watching the news and comparing it to the data is how we stay ahead of the curve. This entire journey shows a strange convergence between the oldest book in the world and our newest technology.
Grok 4. This is the latest artificial intelligence system.
We are watching the Bible and AI say the same thing about our future, and the timeline is moving faster every day. What exactly are your thoughts on Grok identifying the 2037 window for the final act? Do you think the countdown has already started? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. To enjoy more content like this, tap on the next video on your screen.